But let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery coming up. That's another one you'll be covering, Andrew. And of course, the circumstances are vastly different than Kyle Rittenhouse. Can you talk us through what you've had been able to see from the Ahmaud Arbery shooting?
Yeah. So even in the Ahmaud Arbery case, I think given the oddities of Georgia law, that there's a very strong defense there, given the available evidence. It's a more complicated defense, I don't think really for the legal merits, but because there's a racial dynamic in this case, and it's a very powerful racial dynamic. I mean,
can you back up, perhaps, Andrew, for those that aren't familiar? We're talking about the Ahmaud Arbery shooting. Give us the meat of the case, please.
So the idea is that Ahmaud Arbery he had entered a dwelling that wasn't his. He'd unlawfully entered a dwelling. He's caught on camera inside the building. So it's incontrovertible that he was inside this house. It happens to be a house that was undergoing construction or reconstruction. So nobody was living there at the time. But he had been jogging down the street. He entered this dwelling. Then he left the dwelling and he's jogging away. Now, whether he's, the prosecution is going to argue he was recreationally jogging through the neighborhood. Of course, the defense is going to argue that he was in flight from a felony. Under Georgia law, if you unlawfully enter a dwelling, and folks, the Georgia burglary law is very broad. It applies to cars, to tool sheds, almost anything, any structure. If you unlawfully, without permission, enter that structure for the purpose of committing a crime, that's felony burglary under Georgia law. You don't have to actually steal something. So you might enter the structure with the intent to steal something, and there's nothing worth stealing. So you run away, you leave. You've still committed felony burglary. So that's part of it. So if they observed Arbery enter, and by the way, this has been a problem in that neighborhood. They had been asked, the McMichaels had been asked by the local police to keep an eye out for burglaries. So if they had observed Arbery, someone they don't know, not a member of their neighborhood, they knew the person who lived across the street from them, of course, enter the dwelling and then leave, they may have had a reasonable belief that a felony burglary had just been committed. And under a second Georgia law, Georgia's citizens arrest law, if you see a felon fleeing from an apparent felony, you are allowed to pursue that person and make a citizen's arrest. Now, that law has been revoked now, repealed, I should say, and maybe with good reason. It was a very, very broad citizens arrest law. And it dated back to 1865. It was a law that was created in a different time, in a different era, when most communities didn't have professional police departments. The citizenry was the police department. So they were given these very broad powers of citizens arrest. And maybe in modern society, we need to really constrain those citizens arrest powers. But in any case, that was the law on the books at the time of these events. So, of course, the McMichaels' defense will be, listen, we saw an apparent felony burglary. Georgia citizens arrest law says we're allowed to pursue, detain, and arrest a reasonably suspected felon. And that's what we were doing when he attacked us. Fought Travis McMichael for the shotgun. And in the course of fighting over the shotgun, that's when Travis McMichael shot Arbery in self-defense. That's going to be the defense narrative. The prosecution narrative is going to be, there's a couple racists who saw a black guy jogging recreationally through the neighborhood, chased him down with a pickup truck and shot and killed him out of racial animus. And of course, anytime you have that racial component in the case, listen, racism is bad, right? We all hate racism. It's the wrong thing to do. So if you can paint the defendant with that brush, it makes the defendant look very bad. And it also makes it very awkward for a jury to find that defendant not guilty, because nobody wants to acquit an apparent racist or be accused of acquitting apparent racist, because then you'll be painted with the racist brush as well. In the Ahmaud Arbery case, of course, the race is patent throughout the whole case, because we have three white guys chasing a black guy down the street and ultimately shooting him with a shotgun. And if you can kind of mist over the details about who charged who attacked who, because folks, when you watch the video, at the moment of the decisive conflict, the McMichaels their pickup truck is stopped. And Travis McMichael is standing outside the door. Greg McMichael is in the bed of the pickup truck. They're not advancing on Arbery. Arbery advances on them, which you don't hear the media mention very much. When the media reports on this, they make it sound like these guys were rolling down the street in their pickup truck and just shot Arbery in the back as he was jogging on the street. That's not what happened, folks.